A fairly quiet and slow developing story since the Supreme Court's 2022 Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade is the sustained decline of Planned Parenthood. The country's leading abortion provider that boasted some 900 clinics nationally in the 90s has lost a third of them, now down to about 600. At their peak, they said they served 5 million patients nationally. That's now down 60% to 2 million. But they still brag about it with Instagram posts because, hey, that's more people than there are in the states where almost nobody lives. And of course, they are big fans of population control. And the natural assumed conclusion is that all of this decline is the result of the Supreme Court decision. Now that states are free to restrict or ban abortion, that severely limits Planned Parenthood's business model, even though they insist that their business is almost entirely other things, like women's health generally. And new restrictions certainly are a factor, but they don't explain what's happening with Planned Parenthood entirely. If state bans are putting them out of business, why is Planned Parenthood going out of business in New York City? Why are abortion providers struggling to find office space in Los Angeles with the full support of local government? Or, in the latest example, why is Planned Parenthood closing 4 clinics in Minnesota, where Governor Tim Walz signed a bill expanding abortion access after the Supreme Court decision? The factors are complicated and ironic. According to the New York Times last August, inflation under Biden created a lot of financial pressures. The costs of providing abortions increased, and reimbursement for them did not keep up. So the very government spending for which they advocate is a major reason why they can't afford to sustain their business, finding out the hard way that when the government promises to pay for stuff, they really don't, because they really can't. And for as much as abortion restriction might be blamed for business struggles, abortion access is also a financial problem for Planned Parenthood. With abortion access now expanded in many states, later-term abortions have increased, and the later the abortion is, the more expensive it is. That's what happened in New York. Planned Parenthood stopped providing late-term abortions, even though they're legal. They just can't afford to do them. So costs have increased, yes, and some states have restricted or banned abortion, yes, but what doesn't make sense is Planned Parenthood's money isn't really short. It's historically high, actually. They were rolling in cash after the Dobbs decision. Donations jumped almost 50%. And yeah, they've dropped back down to normal since, but for all the claims of threats to public funding for the organization, in 2024, Planned Parenthood took in the most public money it ever has, up 13% to almost $800 million. So how is Planned Parenthood claiming desperation, and why are they closing clinics when they're pulling the most revenue they ever have, or at least the most in their biggest revenue stream, government funding? Well, the answer is much like our government itself. It doesn't matter how much money you collect if you spend even more of it. So on what is Planned Parenthood spending all this money? Well, the clue is right there in that report about their record public funding last year. Are they taking care of more patients, if you can call it that? Does this record money correspond with record medical demand? It does not. Planned Parenthood took in 13% more government bucks in fiscal year 23-24, but they only handled about 2% more patients. Not even that, actually. Way more new dollars than new expenses, at least for patients, and they still say they're broke. It's because they're not spending on the care they insist they provide. They're spending on politics and propaganda. Even MSNBC's reporting acknowledges this fact. All that money that gets donated to Planned Parenthood, well, it doesn't actually take care of people, even if you consider abortion to be care. It pays for legal support and political advocacy and tech upgrades, so they can post even more dank pro-abortion memes, if such a thing exists. The scheme generally works like this. Planned Parenthood gives money to Democrats, and Democrats then use their political power to give taxpayer money to Planned Parenthood. And that corrupt relationship then puts you and me on the hook to pay for most of the stuff they say is so important, but they don't actually fund themselves. Planned Parenthood openly acknowledges that most of its patients use federally funded programs to pay for their services, primarily Medicaid. And what makes the propaganda budget even more questionable is just how lame and ineffective that propaganda actually is. The latest desperate move is recruiting a bunch of celebrities to put their names on a full-page New York Times ad. But that's all it is. It's just a wall of text with names that are supposed to excite you, but nobody even cares about. And that's if you take the time to read all of that, which of course you won't, because even the pages of the New York Times are more compelling. Oh, but this is an important message to keep government out of your business, the ad says. You don't want government making healthcare decisions for you. Right, you just want the government paying for it, but that's not the way this works. If you want total freedom from someone, you can't require him to cut you checks. That's dependence, not independence. So they claim they want freedom. They obviously do not. They want government and Planned Parenthood merged and absorbed into one big cozy agency. That is the business model they've built, and it's what they're trying to sustain. And that's why the latest supposed scandal to threaten Planned Parenthood is the prospect of additional cuts to their funding in the spending bill, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill currently under negotiation. Many states have already cut Planned Parenthood off from Medicaid reimbursement, the organization's primary source of government revenue. This spending bill in Congress would potentially take out another, insurance plans under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. About half of states already ban ACA plans from covering abortion. 13 states require those plans to cover abortion, but the federal bill would eliminate abortion reimbursement under these plans entirely, as well as transgender procedures, or so-called treatments. Now, personally, I didn't even know that abortion was covered under these Affordable Care Act plans. How that's even legal is right up against the line. The Hyde Amendment prohibits federal funding for abortion, at least directly, though, of course, Planned Parenthood has skirted that requirement for decades. These Affordable Care Act plans are privately administered insurance, so a private company is still technically the payer, but they are government subsidized. The government pays the insurer and/or the consumer in the form of tax credits, and the insurer then pays for the abortion. So it's just one middleman removed from direct government payment for abortion, but I guess that's the way the government works. Technical BS that we're told is definitely not that thing, but in practice is absolutely that thing. Anyway, if the current version of this bill becomes law, Planned Parenthood will take another government funding or government subsidy hit. Medicaid is already gone in half the states, and ACA abortion coverage would be gone across the country. And so the House Reproductive Freedom Caucus, led by Congresswomen Diana DeGette and Ayanna Pressley, and according to its membership is pretty much just all the Democrats in Congress anyway, the Reproductive Freedom Caucus tweeted, "Donald Trump and House Republicans' claims that they will not ban abortion nationwide were always a lie. Removing funding for abortion is a big, bogus, backdoor abortion ban." Yeah, very clever triple B pun. We see what you did there. But how is not paying for something the same as banning it? You want an abortion? You pay for that abortion, or you buy an insurance plan that pays for it. If Congress doesn't buy me a gun, are my Second Amendment rights violated? No. My right is to buy one myself. But even that point is secondary to the primary one. It's not what right do you have to force other people to pay for you to kill your kid. It's what right do you have to kill your kid at all? Why is that a good thing? Because what's crazy about the news coverage of Planned Parenthood's decline isn't just the attempt to make Planned Parenthood a victim. It's the way the actual victims are buried in the reporting. But I guess distorted or unprioritized mention is still better than no mention at all. In the New York Times coverage of the medical effects of this new legal landscape post overturning Roe, the reporter says that infant mortality has increased. That's right. Now, more babies are dying because of abortion bans. Well, what do you mean? Babies who would have been aborted are now dying later on, during, or after birth? That's not more death. Those are the same deaths, just happening naturally, or at least not intentionally. The only way these are more deaths is if you don't count the abortions that would have happened as killings, which of course they don't. But forget the statistical methods. Why is this even bad or sad from the pro-choice perspective? Oh, what a shame that those babies died. If only they had been killed faster. To have concern for these deaths is to acknowledge they were lives. If they were lives, then why don't you count the abortions as death? But as is tradition with the New York Times or similar reporting, just scroll down 24 paragraphs to find the truth. Buried under all the nonsense, the supposed infant mortality increase they're describing actually has little correlation to legal changes. Many states that banned abortion have seen infant mortality declines, actually, even under their twisted methodology where abortions don't count as infant mortality. The better explanatory variable is mom's health, which is very often poor these days because of poor personal choices. Eat better, exercise. Your baby will thank you for it, since he might still be alive. Regardless, the story is not more babies dying anyway. The story is the opposite. More babies living. The research that the New York Times is citing says that 478 more babies than expected died in their first year of life after new abortion bans have passed in some states. But that number compares to a 1.7% higher birth rate in states with bans. That means some 22,000 plus babies that potentially would have been aborted were not. Yes, 500 babies lost is sad, and we should try to be healthier so that we don't lose them, but why are we focused on that number, which is 2% of the babies who didn't die but otherwise might have? For every baby supposedly lost to the law, there are 50 who were saved, but somehow more babies born is some kind of tragic injustice for which we all must atone. Why? And as the coverage in Hot Air asks, why don't we ever get those follow-ups? The anecdotes we constantly see and hear are half-true or sometimes even wholly fabricated stories about denials of abortion services leading to a mother's death. In fact, it's often botched abortion services that cause the death. But where are the stories and the follow-ups with these moms and these babies, though? The ones who might have been aborted but weren't. Do these moms regret having their children? Have their babies ruined their lives beyond repair? Because these people exist in far greater volume than the women supposedly harmed or killed by abortion bans. The reason these stories don't get covered is because almost universally the story will be the opposite. Mom is thankful. Mom is glad that she didn't choose otherwise. Mom can't imagine her life without her children, actually, and maybe even thanks God that she didn't fall for the propaganda that killing her kid is the path to happiness. And we all know that instinctively. If you don't believe it, consult the parents in your life, maybe even your own parents. Hey, mom and dad, do you regret giving me life? Because even if you think you're a screw-up, or a disappointment, or just somebody who has yet to reach his full potential, there are very few degenerates, actually degenerate enough, that your own mom and dad think, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe things would have been better if we had just killed him. And hey, even if you are that very rare guy, well, there is still good news for you. Please contact reporters at the New York Times or the Washington Post or other eager media outlets immediately, because that is a story that's ready for print. Mom and dad wish kid was dead instead is always a compelling story that they're looking to publish. They'll probably even pay you for the rights, so there may be an exciting new opportunity for you. And they'll paradoxically write all about how it would have been so much better if you never even had it in the first place. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on X. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Is live on Wednesday and Sunday nights. Looking forward to it. Goodbye. Hey, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, that means you probably found some value in the video. If you found some value in the video, please consider supporting my material. You can do that one time or recurring for as little as $1 a month. It not only helps me sustain, but it helps me pay the people who make my videos possible. Linked in the description for you, mattchristiansenmedia.com/support. Thanks for listening.